What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. On Saturday, July 10th, we have UFC 264. That's Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3. And on that undercard, the co-main event is a battle of top welterweight contenders. Welterweight is 170, and we have the number 2 ranked contender, Gilbert Burns, 19 wins and 4 losses, taking on the number 4 ranked contender, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, 16 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. Outside of Leon Edwards, who just beat Nate Diaz, and Leon Edwards is currently ranked number 3, right behind Gilbert Burns. Aside from him potentially getting a title shot next, assuming that Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion's next defense is against Colby Covington, assuming Usman versus Covington's next, then the thought is that either Leon Edwards or the winner of Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson would be next in line for a title shot. Personally, the way I think they should do it is Leon Edwards, since he just beat Nate Diaz, and this Burns versus Wonderboy fight is taking place at UFC 264, that the winner of Burns-Thompson should probably fight Leon Edwards while they work out the official date of Usman versus Covington 2. That way the dates kind of line up to have the winner of Usman versus Covington 2 take on the winner of the Burns-Thompson winner versus Leon Edwards. But let's get into Burns-Thompson. I really like this matchup. And, sometimes when you have a karate stud like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with such a unorthodox style and an unusual way of movement by MMA standards, some of the fights can be pretty electrifying and the knockouts can be great. When Wonderboy Thompson was on the come up, he had knocked out, Robert Whittaker before Robert Whittaker went up to 185 middleweight, and he had gone on this crazy one where he had beaten Patrick Cote, Jake Ellenberger. He beat Rory McDonald, one of the division's best around that time, and he also stopped Johnny Hendricks. And by the way, when he stopped Jake Ellenberger in 2015, look at how dangerous of a stand-up artist he was with that spinning kick. That was just brilliant. And he was one of those guys who could put you away with his assortment of karate-based tools while being able to keep the fight on the feet and avoiding, the ground, trench types of battles. So Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was just shining, and then he gets a title shot against then champ Tyron Woodley. And that first battle between Woodley and contender or challenger Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, that was a fight of the year quality level of contest, and it resulted in a draw. And so they actually ran it back. They ran it back like 4 months later with Woodley still the champ, Wonderboy still the challenger, and this fight was a 5-round stinker, which resulted in a Tyron Woodley majority decision win. So it wasn't a unanimous decision. It was still a very close fight, but unlike the first fight, which you could almost argue was damn near classic, but the second fight was so bad that everybody forgot how good the first fight was, and it almost kind of hurt both of their reputations in a way. Woodley walks away from those 2 fights still the champion. Wonderboy has now had 2 title shots, came up just a little bit short both times, but because that second fight was so boring in the minds of most viewers, it's almost like they both inherited the reputation of being less than fun fighters to watch, even though, Woodley would go on to knock Darren Till or, drop Darren Till and finish him a couple fights later. I feel like Wonderboy Thompson never, recaptured that glow that he had while he was on the come up, beating McDonald and Hendricks and so forth. I mean, this guy was one of the most exciting fighters to want to watch. I thought that he was a big time threat to Woodley's championship, and he was. I mean, the first fight was an outstanding fight and a draw. Well, since those 2 Woodley versus Wonderboy fights, what did Wonderboy do? He went against Jorge Masvidal, and a lot of people forgot about this fight, especially after Jorge Masvidal hit that skyrocket to stardom. They forgot that just like a couple years ago at that time, now it's about 4 years removed, but Wonderboy beat Masvidal via unanimous decision. He outclassed him in the stand-up. And, aside from the Kamaru Usman recent knockout of Jorge Masvidal, which Nobody knocks out Jorge Masvidal. That was an amazing performance, and I think it shocked just about all of us. But Masvidal is one of the best stand-up fighters in mixed martial arts when it comes to the boxing techniques and the kickboxing and so forth. He's about as dangerous and well-schooled, technical as they come. And Wonderboy outclassed Jorge Masvidal and won via unanimous decision. This wasn't even a split decision. This was it wasn't a total ass whooping, but it was a clear victory in the stand-up for Wonderboy Thompson. And then after that, he had a super close fight with, then rising star, who they were actually trying to fast track to the title. And they did, after this fight, fast track Darren Till. He even leapfrogged Colby Covington because Colby Covington couldn't take the fight against Woodley on short notice after Covington beat RDA in a 5-rounder. The UFC basically said, hey, Covington, do you want the championship fight? Covington's like, I got to heal up a little bit. I'm not ready to get back in there in like a couple of months. UFC said, well, too bad. Darren Till, you get the opportunity. And this was, because Darren Till edged Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in their 5-round contest. Now, I personally thought that Wonderboy should have edged it 3 rounds to 2. Wonderboy actually tore one of the ligaments in his knee because of Darren Till's the oblique kick, where they kind of kicked downward at the knee. And so Wonderboy actually tore a ligament in that fight, continued to fight on, and still it was a super close fight that, it's very disputed. Darren Till edged it, but Darren Till actually suffered the same injury a couple years later against Robert Whittaker in their recent fight. Oblique kick, kind of messing up the knee. I can't recall whether Robert Whittaker's was the same type of oblique kick, but same kind of damage to the knee. But in the case of Till versus Wonderboy, again, the surging prospect Darren Till was granted the decision win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So now it's like, damn, like you just came out of 2 Woodley fights without the title, and then you, looked impressive versus Masvidal, who was not a top 3-4 ranked contender at the time. I mean, he had stopped Cowboy and was still winning most of his fights, but he was still losing too much to be like a top contender. Masvidal was. Again, this is before he hit that little streak, that launch pad. So, beating Jorge Masvidal wasn't like a crown jewel the way it was when Usman just did it twice, once via decision, then another by knockout. At the same time, Masvidal lost to Wonderboy Thompson. He also lost a decision to Damian Maia. So Masvidal was kind of not quite win some, lose some, but close. So whatever juice Stephen Wonderboy Thompson would have gotten after beating Masvidal following those 2 Woodley fights, he pretty much lost in that close decision loss to Darren Till, and then in the following fight where he was beating Anthony Showtime Pettis, who isn't a true 170 welterweight fighter. He's a 155 guy. That's where he had a title reign in the UFC, not a super long one, but he beat Benson Henderson for the second time. Remember, he did that crazy Chung Lee kick off the cage when they were in the WEC. Well, he beat Benson Henderson via submission to capture the 155-pound title, but that was years ago. So Wonderboy fights a reduced version of Showtime Pettis at 170. Wonderboy has Pettis bloodied up. He's outclassing him in the kickboxing competition again because, neither Wonderboy nor Showtime really want the fight to go to the ground. I mean, Showtime is a very good jiu-jitsu fighter, but he'd rather keep it in the kickboxing. Like most guys, when they get into their early to mid-30s, they'd rather just kind of stand up and bang than to do all the wrestling and all just the groundwork. It's exhausting. Well, like I said, Wonderboy was controlling the fight as I saw it against Showtime, and then Showtime pulls another crazy rabbit out of his hat, basically jumps and kicks off of the cage and then does a Superman punch off of bouncing his back against the cage. Just totally timed it perfectly. Wonderboy didn't see it coming, and Wonderboy, you know how I said nobody knocks out Jorge Masvidal? Well, nobody does this to Wonderboy Thompson. He got knocked out unconscious by Showtime Pettis, who again, to me, was fighting one weight class above where his optimal performance weight class is, knocked Wonderboy out, So now you're left with all kinds of questions, like what's the path forward? And Wonderboy is then getting to 37, 38 years old. But then he returns to the cage later on that year, maybe like 8 months removed from the Showtime knockout. And he returns versus Vicente Luque. Yeah, the guy who just stopped Tyron Woodley and beat, I think, like Nico Price before that, and who's been on a nice run himself. Luque has been surging, but just before that little run he's on now, he lost a decision to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. This was on that Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz BMF showdown in November of 2019. So Wonderboy gets that win and then fights Jeff Neal, another decision win, but he sustains a couple injuries, so he has to heal. That fight was in December 2020. So now he's going up against Gilbert Burns, who's ranked 2 steps above him. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, number 4, like I said. Burns, the number 2 contender right now. And Burns, although he has a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, and I mean like world championship level Jiu-Jitsu turned mixed martial artist, you know, he's had a nice run. He, you know, turned pro like in 2012, joined the UFC in 2014, and he himself was kind of a win some lose some guy. You know, he lost a couple fights early in his UFC transition, and then he loses his third to Dan Hooker in 2018, and then he goes on like a 6-fight winning streak. The first couple were at 155 lightweight, and then he goes back to welterweight, and he beats Alexei Kunchenko, Gunnar Nelson via decision. He beat Damian Maia, and that was kind of the turning point because of the visibility of that card. This was Kevin Lee versus the newly crowned lightweight champ, Charles Oliveira. And to tell you how quickly this rise of Oliveira was, this was actually billed as Kevin Lee versus Charles Cowboy Oliveira, with Kevin Lee being the A side. Charles Oliveira is now the champion of the division that Khabib was just champion of, that Conor was championship of, you know, recently. Crazy how things change. But this Lee versus Oliveira card that Gilbert Burns versus Damian Maia was the undercard of, this was just when the COVID pandemic was starting. So this was March 14th. A lot of stuff was shut down. UFC still went forward with their event in Brazil. And, you know, like I said, the US is literally shutting down this same week. And so I think this was the first crowdless UFC event, or the last event before they themselves, the UFC, shut down, before they finally came back with that Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje pay-per-view. Well, on that card, Gilbert Burns knocked out Damian Maia in the first round. And then further into the pandemic, because this is, again, March 14th, just over 2 months later, Burns returns to the cage to fight Tyron Woodley. And this is after Woodley had only lost the title to the current champ, Kamaru Usman. So this is before Woodley would then go on to lose to Colby Covington, and then most recently Vicente Luque. So we weren't sure where Tyron Woodley was. We definitely didn't have all the answers to how diminished of a mixed martial artist Woodley was at the time that he fought Gilbert Burns. Well, Gilbert Burns dominated that fight against Tyron Woodley. I believe he won like every single round. This was a 5-rounder. He dropped and badly hurt Woodley early in that fight. Woodley got his wherewithal, recovered, and that wasn't the last time Woodley got hurt in that fight. He got dropped multiple times. Gilbert Burns just owned this, and it's like, damn, what the hell happened to Woodley? Because not only did it seem like he couldn't pull the trigger, but he was even being out-grappled when they would be in the clinch. It just didn't seem to be the same Woodley. But again, we didn't have the further evidence of the Covington and then the Luque Woodley losses. So now Gilbert Burns is just totally looking like a stud after knocking Maia out and then dominating Tyron Woodley. Gilbert Burns then got a title shot because he was supposed to get his title shot earlier. He was supposed to get his title shot around the same time he just, you know, after beating Tyron Woodley, but he tested positive for COVID. Then they inserted Jorge Masvidal on short notice. That was the fight that Usman beat Masvidal via decision. So Burns, in that case, missed out on the title opportunity and then didn't return to the cage until the following February, where he would finally get that title shot against Kamaru Usman. And Burns looked fantastic in the beginning. He dropped and badly hurt Usman. Again, outstanding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist who just happens to have some hammers for fists and an increased confidence in being able to use it. And this was one of those cases. Well, Kamaru Usman, who was a longtime sparring and training partner with Gilbert Burns, so there was a ton of familiarity there, to where Usman actually left to train with Trevor Whitman after developing his foundational game with Duke Roufus. And so Usman changes camps. He fights Jorge Masvidal the first time, and then he fights Gilbert Burns. He's badly hurt in the first round, makes the adjustments, starts owning the fight with a lethal jab, and eventually finishes Gilbert Burns via TKO in the third round. This was a reversal of dramatic proportions, and he just seemed to take Gilbert Burns' spirit in that fight. And this is actually Gilbert Burns' first fight back. This one against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is Burns' first fight back since that loss. So you've got the added component of the uncertainty psychologically after that experience against Kamaru Usman, where Gilbert Burns' confidence can't be where it was just prior to the Usman fight, right? Like where he had rattled off a 6-fight winning streak, knocking out the likes of Damian Maia and just dominating Tyron Woodley. Gilbert Burns must have felt like he was on top of the world at that point. Well, he got brought way back down to earth in that title challenging stoppage loss. So looking at Burns versus Thompson, I think that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has a psychological edge here. I'm wondering, ask yourself, when is the last time we saw somebody who was committed to the takedowns against Wonderboy Thompson? Like, it wasn't Vicente Luque. It wasn't really Jeff Neal, not Showtime Pettis, not Darren Till, not Jorge Masvidal, not Tyron Woodley, even though Tyron Woodley has a wrestling background. Wonderboy Thompson's fights have been looking like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fights in that it's taking place in the realm that he's the most comfortable. So I don't know if that's because he is doing enough movement or stopping enough takedowns to where people are discouraged from even attempting a takedown. I mean, there have been attempts, but the fights are rarely taking place in that realm. It's been kickboxing, karate-style battles in the stand-up for Wonderboy. So is Gilbert Burns going to try to tap back into his grappling skill set against a guy who I think Gilbert Burns will only have a wild puncher's chance against? Now, Gilbert Burns does have hand speed, and he has devastating power in his fists. I think he actually hits harder than Wonderboy Thompson. And again, Wonderboy Thompson is almost 40 years old. I think he's 38 or 39. Wonderboy Thompson is 38 years old to Gilbert Burns is 34 years old, I believe. And so Wonderboy Thompson has a couple inch height advantage in terms of reach. We're talking 71-inch reach for Burns against a much longer 75-inch reach for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, these are arm reaches, so we're not factoring in the extended leg reach. But in terms of the kickboxing battle, I have trouble believing that in the moments where Gilbert Burns isn't just tagging, because like I said, he could end the fight, I believe, at any moment, but in the slow rounds where there's not any devastating damage being done to either fighter, and they're just kind of, it looks a little bit more like a sparring session. Not that they're not trying to hurt each other, but because the pace and the rhythm of the fight is more so the tit for tat instead of people just blowing each other's heads off, In the tactical battle, if this does turn out to be the stand-up, I'd imagine that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is going to be racking up those rounds if Gilbert Burns isn't dropping them. You know what I mean? Because Wonderboy tends to be one of the better round winners in mixed martial arts, especially in that weight class. Like, where even if you're not totally damaging the guy and stopping the guy, because I don't think Wonderboy has the same stoppage ability today that he did a few years ago when he was stopping people. I think he fights at a more of a measured pace. He's still pretty damn elusive. He's a great defender, and he shows enough movement, gets in and out of harm's way without standing around for super long exchanges. He knows how to dictate the terms of the exchange, kind of like Lyoto Machida, but I think he does it even a little bit more skillfully defensively. Knockout to Showtime Pettis notwithstanding. But I think he's going to be winning the rounds against Gilbert Burns if he doesn't get stopped or clipped badly and stuff. Gilbert Burns, I think, might have his moments, but I really question where Gilbert Burns is psychologically. I don't know if he's going to acquiesce to Wonderboy's desire to make this a kickboxing karate style fight, or if he's going to insist on trying to make this a true mixed martial arts fight where there is a large ground or at least clinch component to it. Because if you look at Gilbert Burns' recent fights, when has he last insisted on making it a grappling affair? It wasn't so much against Usman. I mean, he went for some takedowns once he got hurt against Usman, but that was, he was trying to stand up and bang with Usman. Same thing with Woodley. He hurt Woodley in the stand-up. He did exercise some wrestling and some grappling against Woodley. He did. Against Damian Maia, again, knocked him out in the stand-up. Not many people want to wrestle around with Maia. He is very dangerous with the submissions, one of the greatest ever. So you've got to go several fights back to find where Gilbert Burns was primarily a grappling style mixed martial artist. So I don't think that he's going to try to turn back that page, especially because, like I said, when you start getting into your mid-30s, it becomes tougher to be a true mixed martial artist where you're incorporating a ton of wrestling. Just minute for minute is very tiring. So I think that this is going to be a stand-up fight, and I am actually going to go with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson via decision. Even if Gilbert Burns starts to break down a little bit confidence-wise during the fight, I think he'll still be dangerous, and I still don't think that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson puts his foot on the gas in the way that he used to, where he's really looking for those big stoppages. I think that he is more or less content with controlling and, dominating, if not dominating, then at least winning the rounds. And I think that that's what we're going to get here. And since this is a 3-rounder, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is a 3-rounder. If this is a 3-rounder, then definitely I think that the most likely outcome is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson via decision. But please, let me know what you think about this fight in the comments. Who do you think is going to win? How do you think they're going to win? And how do you think the welterweight picture continues to break down as we go forward? Even though Colby Covington is apparently getting the next welterweight title shot, even though as far as I've seen, I don't think they've made it official yet, he's only beaten Tyron Woodley since he lost his first attempt at Usman's title. I don't think that that's totally warranted. Just beating a rapidly diminishing Tyron Woodley gets you back into the title challenger chair. But, the first fight against Usman was so competitive between Usman and Covington, where I could see just on the strength of the quality and competitiveness of that first fight, super back and forth, especially through the first 4 rounds. I could see how that in itself merits a title shot. So I'm not going to bark too badly against Covington getting almost an immediate rematch title shot against Usman. But how do you want see the welterweight picture breaking down? Is it going to be Leon Edwards to get the next title shot? Is somebody going to totally jump the line like Michael Chiesa? I doubt it. But do you think that the winner of Burns-Thompson gets the next title shot? Or do you agree with my outlook in that the winner of Burns versus Thompson should go against Leon Edwards to determine the next challenger after Colby Covington? But please, let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.